In the endless silence of deep space, the alien cruiser Verethion drifted like a ghost among the stars. Its silver hull reflected the light of a distant red sun, and inside, the crew of the Vareth worked in quiet discipline. They were explorers, logical, precise, emotionless. The Vareth were known across the galaxy as scientists and thinkers, not fighters. Their commander, Krexval, was proud of that. To him, emotion was a disease, something that clouded reason. But that peace ended when the ship's sensors picked up a strange sound. A weak, broken voice echoed through the control room. "This is it. The colony of Urel. Civilians trapped. Please, help." The signal repeated, full of static and fear. Krex turned toward the communication officer. "Origin?" The officer's dark eyes glowed faintly as data scrolled across his screen. "A dying world, sir. System Y-47, radiation levels are high. No active defenses. Population unknown." The commander frowned. "Ignore it. There's nothing there for us." A quiet voice interrupted him. "Commander," said Lura 10, the ship's chief scientist. She stood near the radar console, her pale hands shaking slightly. "We can't ignore that. There are living beings asking for help." Krex didn't even look at her. "And what do you expect us to do? Waste our energy for strangers? We are not caretakers." Lura took a breath, her voice trembling. "We are explorers, yes, but explorers have a duty to protect life." Krex's metallic laughter filled the room. "Protect life? That's what the humans used to say, before they destroyed themselves." The bridge grew silent. Everyone knew the story. The humans, a violent but passionate species, had vanished centuries ago after their final wars. Some said they burned their own world to ashes. Others said the galaxy wiped them out for being too dangerous. To the Vareth, humans were a warning. What happens when emotion rules reason? Lura's voice was soft but firm. "Commander, please, let me analyze the signal one more time." Krex sighed, waving his hand. "Fine. Waste your time if you wish." She nodded and turned back to her console. The signal was broken, fading in and out. Every second, static and interference scrambled the message. She filtered the noise, isolating the core frequency. As she worked, strange data began to appear. Old digital patterns, encryption layers, and frequency codes. Her brow furrowed. The code looked familiar. She leaned closer. Her pulse quickened. "No, that's not possible." She ran the signal again, slower this time, comparing it to the archives in the ship's database. The match was perfect, an ancient communication format used by only one species in history. Lura turned pale. "Commander," she whispered, "you need to see this." Krex looked annoyed but walked over. "What is it now?" She pointed at the display. "This distress call. It's using a human code." The room went silent again, colder than the void outside. Every officer froze. Krex's voice hardened. "Impossible. Humans have been dead for 500 years. "I checked 3 times, Lura said. "It's the old Earth encryption. Type Echo 7 protocol. It was used in the last human wars." The communication officer looked uneasy. "Sir, if humans are gone, then who sent this?" Krex's hands tightened behind his back. His mind raced through the possibilities. Scavengers, pirates, or perhaps machines left behind by the humans. Whatever it was, it didn't make sense. Finally, he said, "Plot a course to Urel. I want to see this myself." The crew exchanged uncertain looks. The Vareth were not known for curiosity mixed with fear. But orders were orders. As the Verethian turned its engines and began the long jump toward the dying planet, the crew whispered among themselves. One voice spoke what everyone was thinking. What if it really is them? Lura didn't answer. She stared at the screen, watching the faint human signal pulse like a heartbeat in the dark, steady, defiant, alive. Hours later, the ship exited hyperspace. The view on the main screen made everyone fall silent. The planet Urel was covered in clouds of dust and fire. Oceans had dried into gray plains. Cities were nothing but broken shapes half buried under ash. Krex stood at the front of the bridge. "Scan for the source." "Signal is coming from beneath the surface," the officer said. "Deep under an old city. Still active." Lura's eyes widened. "Someone's still alive down there." The commander narrowed his gaze. "Prepare a probe. No landing parties until we confirm safety." As the probe descended through the atmosphere, static filled the screens. Radiation storms, debris, lightning. The planet fought to hide its secrets. But then, for one brief moment, the feed cleared. A shadow of a structure appeared. Metal walls, human architecture, and a single light blinking in the darkness. The code repeated again. This is the colony of Urel. Civilians trapped. Please, help. Lura stared in disbelief. It's still running. After centuries? Krex folded his arms. It's a ghost. Nothing more. But deep down a chill ran through the bridge because in that static-filled message, some swore they heard something else. A second voice. Faint and human. Whispering behind the distress signal. If anyone hears this, humanity is not gone. The crew looked at each other. Wide-eyed. Krex tried to speak but couldn't. The impossible truth stood before them. Humanity, the species the galaxy had long buried, had just spoken again. And whatever was waiting on that broken world was about to change everything. The alien cruiser Veretheon hovered above the burned planet Urel, its silver hull glinting faintly under a dying sun. The distress signal still echoed through the ship, weak, broken, but steady. This is the colony of Urel. Civilians trapped. Please, help. Commander Krexval stood on the command deck, his expression unreadable. Around him, the Vareth crew moved in silence, watching the planet's surface through holographic screens. It looked lifeless. Blackened cities, empty oceans. No signs of movement. Lura 10, the ship's scientist, stepped forward. The signal source is confirmed. Deep underground. Old human architecture mixed with alien materials. There may still be survivors, Krex frowned. After 500 years? Unlikely, she looked up, and yet the code still runs. That silenced him. For the Vareth, logic ruled everything, and this made no logical sense. Hours passed as the Veretheon descended into low orbit. Thick clouds of dust rolled across the surface like smoke. Lightning flashed through storms of red sand. Lura watched the screen, her fingers tapping quickly across her console. I've found something else. Faint energy readings. Not natural, it's a power generator. Still active, Krex turned to her. Show me. The image zoomed in. Deep below the ruins of a once great city, a faint blue light pulsed rhythmically. Lura whispered, That's a human reactor. Ancient design, but still working. The bridge went quiet again. Even Krex felt something he didn't like, unease. Finally, he said, Prepare a landing craft. I'll see this with my own eyes. Lura's eyes widened. You're going down yourself? Yes, Krex replied. If humans are somehow involved, I want the truth. He hesitated, then added softly, And I want you with me. Lura 10. The shuttle broke through the clouds and entered a storm of dust and lightning. The air outside glowed orange with static. As they descended, they saw the remains of a great city. Towers melted by fire. Ships crashed into streets, statues broken and burned. Everywhere they looked, there was silence. When the shuttle landed, the ground shook under its weight. Krex and Lura stepped out in sealed suits, their lights cutting through the ash. Radiation levels high, Lura said, but breathable in short bursts. Life signs are faint, deep below us. They followed the signal through the ruins. Pieces of human writing covered the cracked walls. Old Earth languages no one spoke anymore. Lura stopped to touch one of the walls. Her gloved hand brushed away the dust. The words read, Hope lives below. Her chest tightened. They were trying to save someone. Krex said nothing. He scanned ahead. There's a tunnel entrance. The signal comes from inside. They entered the tunnel. It stretched down into darkness, lined with collapsed metal and glowing symbols. It felt more like a tomb than a refuge. After several minutes, the tunnel opened into a huge underground chamber. And there, standing at the center, was a human structure still glowing blue with energy. Around it lay hundreds of broken stasis pods, many shattered, some still sealed. Lura gasped. Cryo chambers. Krex approached one of the intact pods and wiped the frost from its glass. Inside lay an alien child. Small, fragile, still breathing slowly in suspended sleep. Another pod showed an older alien woman. Then another, and another. Dozens of species the Vareth had seen across the galaxy, all frozen in time. But something else caught Lura's eyes. In the middle of the chamber stood a statue, tall, armored, and unmistakably human. The statue held a flag, the old Earth insignia burned into metal. Below it, a plaque read, For those who could not defend themselves, we stand guard until the stars fade. Lura whispered. They saved them. They built this shelter for refugees. Krex's voice was low. You're saying humans died protecting aliens? She nodded. That's exactly what they did. He looked at the stasis pods, at the silent faces inside. Why, they were at war. Everyone was at war. Lura turned to him. Because humans never saw the helpless as enemies. Suddenly, the communication link crackled. Commander, this is the Varethion. We've detected multiple ships entering the system. Unidentified signatures. Wait, hostile. They're locking weapons. Krex's eyes narrowed. How many? 30. No, 50 ships. They're heading straight for us, the warlord fleets. Scavengers and raiders who hunted dead worlds for old tech. Lure. The Vareth fleet floated above the ruined planet Urel, their silver ships forming a fragile wall between the surface and the incoming storm of enemies. The scanners lit up with red warnings. Hostile vessels incoming. Distance 200,000 kilometers and closing fast. The warlord fleet was massive. Dozens of scavenger ships, battlecruisers and destroyers flying in loose formation. They were hunters of dead worlds, taking what they wanted and killing everything that stood in their way. Commander Krex Val stood on the bridge of the Varethion, his face cold, but his mind racing. They had never fought a war. The Vareth were scientists, explorers, thinkers, not warriors. But below them, deep under the ash and broken cities, hundreds of alien refugees still slept inside the human-built shelter. And Krex had made a promise, one that echoed from an ancient human message. Protect them. That's what humans do. He turned to his crew. Prepare all defense systems. Position our ships in orbit. We hold this planet. The crew hesitated. Logic told them to retreat. Survival was priority. But Krex's tone left no room for argument. For the first time in their history, the Vareth prepared for battle. As the enemy fleet approached, Lura Ten watched the scanners closely. Her heart raced as she saw the numbers. 50 warships, she whispered. And we have 10, Krex didn't blink. Then we aim better. Moments later, the void erupted in flashes of light. The first wave of missiles streaked across space, tearing through the blackness. Explosions lit the horizon like new stars. The Varethion shook under the impact. Sparks flew across the bridge. Shields at 60%. An officer shouted. Krex barked. Return fire. Target their lead cruiser. Blue plasma cannons blazed from the Vareth ships, hitting the enemy with precision strikes. One scavenger ship exploded, breaking apart into glowing debris. But for every enemy destroyed, 2 more took its place. Lura grabbed the edge of the console. We can't hold them forever. I know, Krex said through gritted teeth. But we'll hold long enough for those below to live. Then suddenly, all across the radar, something new appeared, a faint ripple in space. A distortion behind the enemy fleet. The sensor officer frowned. Commander, I'm detecting large objects incoming, multiple jumps from deep space. Unknown signature. Krex's eyes narrowed. More enemies? The officer's voice trembled. No, sir. These readings, they're human. The bridge fell silent. Lura froze. That's not possible. But then the view screen filled with light as the newcomers emerged from the void. Enormous ships, black as midnight and scarred by age. Their hulls bore the faded symbol of Earth, a blue circle surrounded by stars. They moved in perfect formation. Massive, slow, and silent. Krex whispered. Humans. One of the ships transmitted a signal, old Earth frequency. The message was clear and calm. This is Admiral Mara Keen of the United Earth Defense Command. To the vessels above Urel, stand down. You've done enough. The voice was human, tired, steady, full of authority. Lura's eyes filled with disbelief. They're real. They survived. Krex quickly opened the comm. This is Commander Krex of the Varethion. We received a distress signal, human code. We came to protect the helpless below. There was a pause. Then Mara replied softly. Then you've done what few ever dared. Hold your line, Commander. We'll take it from here. The human fleet advanced. Their ships were massive relics, dreadnoughts from the last Galactic War, still armed with ancient weapons that glowed with terrifying energy. The scavenger fleet turned their guns toward them. Ready to strike, the humans didn't wait. In perfect silence, the lead dreadnought, Vigilant Dawn, unleashed its main cannon. A beam of white light cut through the dark. splitting 3 enemy cruisers in one shot. The explosion burned so bright that the Vareth crews had to shield their eyes. Then, dozens of smaller human ships moved in formation, firing precise bursts that tore the scavenger lines apart. Lura watched in awe. Their ships, they're old, but their firepower is beyond anything we've ever seen, Krex finished quietly. Within minutes, the enemy fleet was in chaos. Their formations broke. Their leaders screamed orders that no one followed. The humans didn't fight like conquerors. They fought like guardians, every move calculated to protect the planet below. When an enemy cruiser tried to dive toward the surface, human fighters intercepted it, sacrificing themselves to keep it from crashing into the ground. Laura's voice shook. They're dying to protect people they don't even know. Krex looked at the burning sky. They always did. After hours of battle, the enemy fleet began to retreat. The remaining ships fled into hyperspace, leaving behind wreckage and silence. The human dreadnoughts turned slowly, moving toward the planet. Krex ordered a secure link. Admiral Keen, the threat is over. Why risk so much for a dead world? Her voice came through the speakers, quiet but heavy with emotion. Because this world isn't dead. There are refugees down there. Survivors we left behind long ago. We built that shelter, Lura gasped. You built it? Mara nodded on the screen. Her face appeared, older, scarred, but unmistakably human. We tried to save them when the wars ended. We failed, or so we thought. Krex stared at her. The galaxy believed you were extinct. Mara smiled faintly. Extinct? No, we learned to disappear, to watch, to protect from the shadows. She looked directly into the camera, her tone softening. And you, Commander, you did something rare today. You chose compassion over logic. For that, humanity thanks you. Lura's voice trembled. Admiral. What happens now? The human's expression darkened. Now we make sure this never happens again. The scavengers will return, and we will be waiting. The Vareth watched as human ships descended into the planet's atmosphere, landing near the ruins. Drones and medical shuttles spread out, scanning the underground chambers. Lura turned to Krex. They're not here to conquer. They're here to rebuild, he nodded slowly, and protect. For the first time in his life, Krex understood something beyond logic, a power that no science could measure. Compassion, the same force that brought a dead species back from the edge of extinction, and made them guardians once again. As the human fleet moved across the sky, one thought echoed through every Vareth mind. If this was what humans did for the helpless, then maybe the galaxy had misjudged them all along. The sky above Yrel burned red. What had once been a dead planet was now alive with fire and light. Human dreadnoughts hung in the clouds like floating mountains, their metal skin blackened by centuries of war. Below them, the alien refugees began to wake. One by one, the stasis pods inside the underground shelter opened with soft hisses. Small hands reached out, frightened, trembling, alive. The Vareth scientists moved among them, giving food and warmth. The air smelled of dust and old machinery. For the first time in their history, the cold, logical Vareth were helping strangers, and above, the humans watched in silence. Commander Krex Val stood on the bridge of the Varethion, looking up at the massive human flagship, the Vigilant Dawn. Its engines pulsed like the heart of a giant. He still couldn't believe it. Humanity had returned. Beside him, Lura 10 adjusted her headset, listening to the human transmission. Admiral Mara Keen is requesting joint coordination, she said. She wants to stabilize the surface and prepare defenses. Krex frowned. Defenses? Against what? Before Lura could answer, the ship's alarm blared. The screen flashed red. Multiple jump signatures detected. The officer's voice was full of panic. New enemy fleet approaching, more than 100 ships. Krex froze. They called reinforcements. The scavenger warlords were back and stronger, angrier, and ready for revenge. Moments later, Admiral Mara's voice came over the comms, calm but firm. To all ships, hold position. We fight here. Krex stared at the screen. You can't face them all. That's suicide. Mara's reply was quiet but cold. It's what we do. The humans began to move. Hundreds of defense drones launched from their carriers, forming a steel curtain around the planet. Satellite cannons hidden in orbit came online, glowing bright white. The vigilant Dawn moved into the front line, blocking the enemy's path to the surface. The Vareth officers looked to their commander. "Orders, sir?" Krex took a deep breath. He had always believed emotion was weakness. But now, watching humanity stand against impossible odds, he understood what strength really was. "Form beside them," he said. "We fight with the humans." The battle began like a storm. The first wave of enemy cruisers entered orbit, firing heavy plasma bolts that cut through space like lightning. Human ships responded instantly, unleashing massive counterstrikes. The sky turned into a burning ocean of light. The Vareth ships dove into the chaos, their blue plasma bursts joining the human fire. For the first time in their history, the Vareth fought not for science, but for others. On the Varethion's bridge, Lura watched the readings. Their energy output is incredible. They're overclocking their weapons beyond safe levels. Krex nodded grimly. They're burning everything they have. Everywhere she looked, human ships took the brunt of the fire. They placed themselves between the enemy and the planet, forming a living shield. Even when one ship was hit, it didn't retreat. It simply adjusted its position, protecting those behind it. It was more than a fleet. It was a wall of sacrifice. The enemy's numbers were overwhelming. More scavenger ships warped into the system, hundreds now, their black hulls filling the void. The human and Vareth lines began to bend under the weight of fire. The vigilant dawn. For 3 days, the sky above Urel stayed red. It wasn't sunset or atmosphere. It was the fire of what the humans had left behind. The blast from the vigilant dawn had burned through the enemy fleet, and through itself. The humans had saved everyone, but at a terrible cost. Now, silence ruled the stars. Commander Krexval stood on a cliff overlooking the Vareth refugee valley. Below, thousands of alien survivors rebuilt shelters, guided by the last human rescue teams who had arrived after the battle. Children laughed. Fires burned for warmth, and yet in every direction the sky still carried the color of sacrifice. Krex clenched his hands behind his back. "They gave everything," he said quietly. Beside him, Lura Ten nodded, her eyes tired but shining, and they never once asked for help in return. She pointed to a small human camp nearby. Those who had survived the blast, engineers, medics, and a few soldiers, were still working nonstop, repairing ships, tending wounds, and refusing to rest. One of them stood out, a tall woman with gray in her hair and the same fire in her eyes as her fallen admiral, Commander Riley Harth. She was now the highest-ranking human in orbit. Later that night, Krex and Lura were called to meet her, inside the damaged command tent. A holographic map flickered between static and light. Human and Vareth officers stood around it, silent, waiting. Riley looked exhausted. Her uniform was torn, her voice hoarse. But when she spoke, the room went still. "We saved the planet, but the war isn't over," Krex frowned. "How many enemies survived?" Riley tapped the hologram. Dozens of red marks blinked far beyond the system. Scavenger fleets regrouping. "They'll return when they believe we're weak again." Lura's voice was low. "Then what do we do?" Riley looked up. Her eyes were cold, focused. "We make sure they never see weakness again." The next day, humans and Vareth began working together, something no one had thought possible. Human engineers taught the Vareth how to reinforce their ships with Earth alloys. The Vareth scientists, in return, shared energy systems far more efficient than any human reactor. Together, they built something new, a hybrid fleet. Lura stood on the platform of a half-repaired frigate, watching workers move in perfect rhythm. "They never stop," she whispered. Krex, standing beside her, nodded. "They can't afford to." Down below, Commander Riley walked among the workers, lifting heavy panels herself, ignoring her wounds. When a Vareth soldier tried to stop her, saying, "You're injured, Commander," she only smiled faintly. "So is the galaxy. But it still moves." As days passed, the people of Urel began to change. The Vareth, who once saw emotion as weakness, now began to understand human empathy. They learned the meaning of comfort, of courage born from care. Children ran up to humans without fear, offering small metal trinkets as gifts. A few even wore badges shaped like the Vigilant Dawn's emblem, an open hand over a burning star. One evening, Lura found Riley sitting alone by a campfire, staring at the stars. Lura sat beside her quietly. For a while, neither spoke. Finally, Lura asked, Was Admiral Mara your mentor? Riley nodded slowly. She taught me that war isn't just about destroying your enemy. It's about protecting what's worth living for. Laura looked at her. Do you believe that cost was worth it? Riley's eyes were distant. If we had done nothing, those people down there would be ash, so yes. Every loss was worth it. Then she whispered something under her breath, words Laura barely caught. But I still hear her voice every night. Days turned into weeks. The Vareth repaired their cities. The humans helped rebuild orbital defenses. Together they planted crops, raised shelters, and forged a fragile peace. But deep in the darkness beyond the Ural system, something was moving again. A faint signal pulsed through the void. It was old, thousands of years old, and it carried a single human encryption code. When Riley's team found it, their blood ran cold. This is from the Vigilant Dawn, said the technician. Everyone in the command center froze. But that ship was destroyed, Laura said. Riley stared at the screen, her expression unreadable. Or maybe... It wasn't. The transmission was short, just 3 seconds long. Static, followed by a distorted human voice whispering through the noise. We are still here. Then silence. That night, Krex and Riley stood on the observation deck of the new defense station orbiting Urel. Below them, the rebuilt cities glowed softly. The stars stretched endlessly above. Krex spoke first. If that message is real, then someone survived. But why send it now? Riley's hand tightened on the rail. Because they're warning us. Warning us. She turned to face him, her expression grim. The Vigilant Dawn didn't just destroy the enemy fleet. It destroyed a weapon the scavengers were building. A weapon designed to erase entire systems. If it survived, they'll want it back. Laura's voice came through the comms, urgent. Commander! Long-range scanners are detecting movement near the outer rim. Riley's eyes hardened. They're coming back. Krex looked toward the planet where refugees slept under the false peace of a red dawn. Then we stand again? Riley nodded once. Until the last breath. The alarm lights flared red across every ship in orbit. Engines roared to life. The hybrid human Vareth fleet formed up side by side. This time they were not fighting to survive. They were fighting to protect what the fallen had died for. As the stars filled with the cold light of enemy ships reappearing on the edge of the system, Laura whispered under her breath, They think we're weak again. Riley's voice echoed across the comms, fierce and unshaken. Then let's remind them what humanity does. When someone threatens the helpless, the fleet engines flared like sunrise. The second war for Urel had begun. The stars trembled. Hundreds of enemy warships entered the Ural system. Dark metal, crimson engines, like a storm of knives cutting through the void. At the heart of it all, a massive ship loomed, a dreadnought 3 kilometers long, pulsing with unstable red energy. The scavenger warlord fleet had returned. Inside the Vareth human command station, alarms screamed. The control screens flickered under interference. Commander Riley Harth stood before the main display, her face calm but her voice sharp. This is it. They're not here for the planet. They're here for the weapon. Laura 10 looked up from her console. The weapon? The one the Vigilant Dawn destroyed? Riley nodded grimly. They must think it survived the explosion. We can't let them find it. Across the bridge, Commander Krexval raised his head. Then we don't run. We end this, here. Riley gave a fierce smile. That's the human way. Moments later, the joint fleet launched. Dozens of hybrid ships burst from orbit. Vareth sleek silver hulls reinforced with human armor plating. Engines roared, painting trails of blue light through the void. Krex's command ship Varethion led the center line. Riley's flagship, the Ark Resolve, flanked the right side. Across the fleet, soldiers from 2 species stood side by side. Different voices, same purpose. As the first enemy salvos lit the darkness, Krex's voice echoed across all comms. Remember what we're fighting for. The helpless, the lost, the ones who cannot fight. Hold the line. And then the war began. The first impact tore through the black enemy missiles struck the front ranks, shredding small escort ships into flame. But the humans in Vareth didn't retreat. They moved like one living thing. Shield drones forming walls, counterfire blazing through the void. Laura shouted from her console, They're focusing on the command ships. We need to split their attention. Riley's voice cut through the noise. All wings, break pattern Delta. Hit their carriers head-on. Her ship dove through the chaos, cannons glowing white-hot. It smashed through enemy fighters, debris scattering like meteors. Inside the Ark Resolve, the crew held steady as the hull shook violently. A young Vareth pilot yelled, "Shields failing!" Riley gritted her teeth. "Then we fight without them." She turned to her crew. "This is for every child still sleeping under our protection. Fire the rail batteries." The ship roared. A massive projectile tore across the void, punching straight through an enemy cruiser. Cheers erupted through the bridge, until another explosion ripped across the left flank. Lura gasped. "The Varethion is hit." Inside his shattered bridge, Krex wiped the blood from his forehead. Fire burned around him, sparks falling like rain. His second officer screamed, "Commander, we've lost half our reactors." Krex's voice remained calm, steady. "Divert all power to forward shields. Hold position." "But sir, hold it," Krex snapped. "If they break through us, they reach the planet. That cannot happen." He looked through the viewport at the sea of enemy ships surrounding them. For a second, he thought of the statue deep below the surface of Ural, the human soldier standing tall under ash. The words engraved beneath it, "We stand guard until the stars fade." Krex whispered, "Then we'll stand a little longer." He slammed his fist down. "All guns, fire at will." The Varethion lit up like a dying star. Every cannon, every beam fired at once. Enemy ships shattered under the barrage, but the Varethion was breaking apart too. Back aboard the Ark Resolve, Lura watched the data feed collapse. "He's going to die if he stays there." Riley's jaw tightened. "No, he's buying us time." She turned to her comms officer. "Prepare the Vigilant Protocol." The officer froze. "Commander, that's forbidden. It hasn't been used since—" "I know." Lura's eyes widened. "What is the Vigilant Protocol?" Riley looked at her, calm, fierce, and human. "It's the failsafe Admiral Mara left behind. A system that links every ship's energy core into one unified burst. A single, unstoppable,